The temperature read -5 degrees Celsius, and Teresa knew she had maybe 3 hours before hypothermia claimed her. She was deep in the Colorado Rockies, 30 miles from the nearest road, nursing 3 cracked ribs and a shattered spirit courtesy of the man who was supposed to be her protector. She thought the cold would kill her first. She was wrong. At midnight exactly, the wind stopped. That's when she heard it, not howling, but the synchronized breathing of something massive circling her pathetic shelter. Teresa gripped the dull kitchen knife she'd stolen from the pack house, her whole body shaking. Not from a cold this time. From recognition. She'd heard the stories. The feral alpha of the Shadow Peak territory. The one who'd lost his mind 20 years ago and turned his pack into something twisted. They said he collected omegas like trophies, that his eyes had gone black from the darkness inside him. When the tent flap tore open, she saw those eyes. Pitch black. Emotionless. And when he inhaled her scent, she felt the mate bond snap into place like a bear trap closing on her soul. She didn't know it yet, but this wasn't a rescue. This was a different kind of death. But before we dive in, I need to ask you something that truly matters to me. If you've enjoyed my stories before, or if you're here hoping this one will move you, please don't leave without subscribing. Without your subscription, YouTube buries everything I create. The people searching for stories that make them feel something, stories about resilience, love, impossible choices, they'll never find them. Because the algorithm decided I wasn't worth showing. I'm not asking for money. Just 30 seconds to hit that subscribe button so others can discover these stories too. I pour everything I have into every word, every character, every chapter. And knowing I could reach someone who desperately needs it but won't because you didn't click, that genuinely breaks my heart. Please subscribe. It costs you nothing, but to me, it means someone believes these stories matter. Now, let's continue. Teresa stared at the water bottle, now frozen solid in her backpack. $8. That's what it cost at the gas station, and she'd stolen it because $8 was more than she had. More than Victor Stone had allowed her to have before he kicked her out. The tent, if you could call it that, was a torn camping tarp she'd draped over fallen branches. One side kept collapsing. Her left side screamed with every breath, a symphony of broken bones that refused to knit. Werewolves healed in hours. But Teresa's wolf had never properly manifested. 14 years old when she should have shifted, and nothing. Now at 26, she was still waiting for a miracle that would never come. Defective, Victor had called her, his boot connecting with her ribs in the pack meeting hall while everyone watched. You're not even worth the food you eat. But that wasn't why he exiled her. 2 nights ago, she'd been cleaning Victor's office, Omega work, beneath everyone, when she'd seen the safe hanging open. Inside were stacks of cash, passports, and photos. Photos of missing Omegas from neighboring territories. Photos with prices written on them. Auction receipts. Victor Stone wasn't just an alpha. He was a trafficker. When she'd gasped, he'd been behind her. You shouldn't have seen that, Teresa. The beating that followed wasn't just punishment. It was attempted murder. He'd left her in the woods with nothing, telling the pack she'd run away. No one would look for her. No one ever did. Teresa pulled the thin emergency blanket tighter. The silver material crinkled, doing nothing against the sub-zero night. Her breath came out in white clouds that lingered too long in the still air. That's when she noticed. The air was too still. The wind had been howling for hours, shaking her pathetic shelter. Now silence. Complete, unnatural silence. Then she heard the breathing. Not wind. Not imagination. The deep, rhythmic inhalations of multiple large creatures. Surrounding her. Teresa grabbed the knife. The blade had rust spots and a loose handle, but it was all she had. Her hand shook so badly the metal rattled against her cheap digital watch, the only thing her mother had left her before disappearing 10 years ago. "I know you're out there," she whispered. A growl answered, low, resonant, and coming from every direction at once. Through the gaps in her tarp shelter, she saw them. Shadows, massive and hulking, moving with unnatural synchronization. They weren't circling randomly, they were forming a perfect perimeter. Military precision. One shadow broke from the formation. It was larger than the others, moving with a predator's confidence. The shape pressed against her tarp, and Teresa saw the outline, a wolf the size of a bear, standing on 4 legs that looked powerful enough to crush stone. The tarp ripped. Not from claws, but from something else, like the fabric simply gave up in the presence of whatever stood on the other side. The massive wolf stepped through. His fur was slate gray, almost colorless in the moonlight. But it was his eyes that made Teresa's blood freeze. They weren't the normal amber or gold of a werewolf. They were completely black. No iris, no white. Just endless darkness that seemed to swallow light. Teresa's knife clattered to the ground. She knew those eyes. Everyone in the supernatural community knew those eyes. Dominic Ashford, the feral king of Shadow Peak. The story said he'd gone insane 20 years ago after his mate died. He'd slaughtered half his own pack in grief-fueled rage, then disappeared into the mountains with the survivors. Those who returned told tales of a pack that had devolved into something primitive, violent, worshipping their alpha like a dark god. The massive wolf lowered its head, black eyes fixed on her. He inhaled deeply, his nose nearly touching her throat. Teresa squeezed her eyes shut. This was it. At least it would be quick. But the killing blow never came. Instead, she felt heat. The wolf's body temperature was like a furnace, and he pressed closer, nearly pinning her against the fallen log behind her. His nose moved along her collarbone, her jaw, her hairline, scenting her. Then the most terrifying sound, a deep, possessive rumble that vibrated through her entire body. Teresa opened her eyes. The black wolf was staring at her with an intensity that felt like being flayed alive. Slowly, deliberately, he began to shift. Bones cracked and reformed. Fur receded. Within seconds, a man crouched before her. Dominic Ashford was massive even in human form, 6.5 feet of corded muscle and visible scars. His hair was long and gray-streaked, pulled back in a rough tie. His face was hard, weathered, with a jagged scar running from his left temple to his jaw. And those eyes, still completely black, stared into her soul. "Mine," he said. His voice was gravel and smoke, barely human. Teresa's heart hammered. "What?" "Mate." The word was a statement, not a question. His hand reached out, moving toward her face. Teresa flinched back. "Don't." He froze. Something flickered in those black eyes. Anger? Pain? It was impossible to tell. "You're hurt," he said, his gaze dropping to where she clutched her ribs. "I'm fine," Teresa lied, her voice shaking. Dominic's head tilted, predatory. "Who hurt you?" "It doesn't matter. I just need." "Name." The command hit her like a physical force. Teresa gasped, feeling an unnatural compulsion to answer. The Alpha command. But she'd never been susceptible to those before. Her lack of wolf made her immune. Except now, the words spilled out against her will. Victor Stone. Iron Ridge Pack. Dominic's expression didn't change, but the temperature around them dropped 10 degrees. The other wolves outside began to growl in harmony, responding to their alpha's rage. "He will die," Dominic said simply. Then he stood, towering over her. "You're coming with me." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Teresa said, trying to sound brave. "I've heard the stories. Your pack." "My pack," Dominic interrupted, "will protect you now. You belong to me. I don't belong to anyone." Those black eyes narrowed. "The bond doesn't lie. You felt it. I am your mate, and you are mine. That makes you Luna of Shadow Peak." Teresa stared at him. This couldn't be real. The mate bond was supposed to be beautiful, destined. Not this. Not with a monster who'd murdered his own pack. "I'm refusing it," she said. "I reject." Dominic moved faster than her eyes could track. His hand clamped over her mouth, cutting off the words. His face was inches from hers, and for the first time, she saw something in those black eyes: fear. "Never say those words," he growled. "If you reject the bond, it will kill us both. The pain will drive me feral, and I'll take half the mountain with me. You'll die slowly, your wolf eating you from the inside." "I don't have a wolf," Teresa said against his palm. Dominic's head tilted again, studying her. Slowly, he removed his hand. "You do. She's just sleeping." He paused. "And she's about to wake up." Before Teresa could ask what he meant, Dominic grabbed her. Not roughly, but with absolute authority. He lifted her over his shoulder like she weighed nothing. "Put me down." Teresa screamed, pounding on his back. He ignored her, shifting mid-stride back into his massive wolf form while still holding her. The other wolves fell in around them, forming an honor guard as Dominic carried her deeper into the mountains. Teresa watched her pathetic shelter disappear into the darkness behind them. She didn't know it yet, but that tent had been the last place she'd ever be free. The Shadow Peak territory was nothing like Ironridge. There were no cozy cabins, no communal halls with warm fires. The pack house was a compound built into the mountainside, concrete bunkers and chain-link fences topped with razor wire. It looked less like a home and more like a prison. Or a cult. Dominic carried Teresa through the main gate, past guards who bowed their heads in submission. No one spoke. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of snow under feet and paws. They entered the largest bunker. Inside, it was surprisingly warm, heated by industrial radiators. The space was sparse: concrete floors, metal furniture, flickering fluorescent lights. At the far end was a throne. An actual throne made of welded metal and what looked like bones. Teresa's stomach turned. Dominic set her down, and immediately two women approached. They were thin, hollow-eyed, wearing identical gray dresses. "Omegas. Clean her. Feed her. Bandage her wounds," Dominic ordered. He looked at Teresa. "You'll stay in my chambers tonight. Tomorrow, we'll discuss your position." "My position?" Teresa's voice cracked. "I'm not staying here." "You are." Dominic's black eyes held no warmth. "You're my mate. That means your pack. Leaving isn't an option. You can't just kidnap me. I saved your life. Victor left you to die. Here, you'll be protected." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "And here, you'll learn what you really are." Before Teresa could respond, he turned and walked through a heavy metal door, leaving her with the two silent Omega women. One of them finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Come with us, Luna. We'll prepare you." "I'm not Luna," Teresa said firmly. The women exchanged glances. Fear flickered in their eyes. "Please," the second one whispered. "Don't anger him. It's safer if you just cooperate." The way she said it made Teresa's blood run cold. They led her through a maze of concrete corridors to a communal bathroom that looked like it belonged in a military barracks. The water was scalding hot, and the Omegas worked in silence, washing the dirt and blood from Teresa's skin with efficient, mechanical movements. When they reached her ribs, Teresa hissed in pain. "These won't heal right without a wolf," one woman murmured. "Did the alpha say when he'd complete the bond?" "Complete it?" Teresa asked. The woman's eyes widened. "The mating bite. Once he marks you, your wolf will surface fully. The bond will strengthen you." Teresa's mouth went dry. "He hasn't mentioned that." "He will." The woman's voice was flat. "He always does. Always." Teresa grabbed her wrist. "What do you mean always?" The woman pulled back, fear naked on her face. "Nothing. Forget I said anything." But Teresa had seen the scars on the woman's neck. Old bite marks, multiple overlapping. Not from a mate bond. From something else. They dressed her in a gray dress identical to theirs and led her to Dominic's chambers. The room was surprisingly large, carved directly into the mountain rock. A massive bed dominated the space, covered in furs. The walls were lined with weapons, swords, axes, hunting knives, and skulls. Animal skulls arranged in precise patterns. Teresa's legs felt weak. "The Alpha will join you soon," one Omega said. Then they left, closing the heavy door with a final sounding thud. Teresa was alone. She moved to the door, testing the handle. Locked from the outside. She was trapped. Her breathing quickened. This wasn't salvation. This was a nightmare dressed up as rescue. She'd escaped one monster only to be claimed by another. The door opened. Dominic entered, and the space immediately felt smaller. He'd changed into dark clothes, but his presence filled the room like smoke. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the bed. Teresa didn't move. "I want to leave." "No, you can't keep me here." "I can and I will." Dominic moved closer, each step deliberate. "You're my mate. That means you're under my protection. Victor wants you dead. Out there, you have days before exposure or hunters find you. Here, you have everything you need. Except freedom." Something dark flickered across Dominic's face. "Freedom is an illusion. Safety is real. I'm offering you safety." "At what cost?" Dominic stopped directly in front of her. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his features, the barely contained violence in every line of his body. "The cost is obedience," he said quietly. "My pack survives because we're unified. Because everyone knows their place. You'll learn yours. And if I refuse?" His hand moved to her face, cupping her jaw. The touch was almost gentle, but his grip was iron. "You won't," he said. "Because deep down, you know I'm right. You have nowhere else to go. No one else who wants you." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Except me." Teresa's eyes burned with unshed tears. Because he was right. She had nothing. No pack, no family, no home. She was nothing. "I won't bite you tonight," Dominic continued. "You're injured, and forcing the bond now would be dangerous. But soon, Teresa. Soon, you'll accept what you are." "And what's that?" His black eyes bored into hers. "Mine." He released her and moved to the far side of the room, lying down on a pile of furs on the floor. "Sleep. You're safe here. I'll be between you and the door." Teresa stood frozen, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed to run. But where would she go? Into the freezing night, back to Victor's territory, into the hands of the next predator? She looked at the bed, then at Dominic's massive form blocking the exit. She had no choice. She climbed onto the bed, pulling the heavy furs over herself, and stared at the ceiling. Outside, wolves howled. It wasn't a song of joy or unity. It sounded like mourning. Teresa closed her eyes and tried not to think about the bite marks on that Omega's neck. Tried not to think about what always meant. Tried not to think about the fact that she'd just traded one prison for another. And this time, the warden claimed to love her. Teresa woke to pain. Not the dull ache of her ribs, this was different. Deeper. It felt like something inside her chest was trying to claw its way out. She gasped, sitting up in the dark. Her skin felt too tight, her bones wrong. Heat flooded through her body, but not the pleasant warmth of the furs. This was burning, searing from the inside out. Dominic was at her side in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. Don't fight it. What's happening? Teresa's voice came out strangled. Your wolf. She's waking. I can't. Teresa doubled over as another wave of agony tore through her. Yes, you can. Dominic's voice was firm. You've been suppressed your whole life. Malnourished, abused, kept weak. But the mate bond is feeding you my energy. Your wolf is finally strong enough to surface. Teresa screamed as her back arched. She felt her bones beginning to shift, to crack and reform. But something was wrong. Normal shifting took seconds. This was slow, agonizing, like her body was fighting itself. It shouldn't hurt this much, she gasped. Dominic's jaw tightened. No, it shouldn't. He grabbed her arms, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. Your wolf isn't like others. I can sense it. She's something different. Don't resist her. Let her come. Teresa couldn't have resisted if she'd tried. The transformation was happening whether she wanted it or not. Her fingers elongated into claws. Black claws, not the normal brown or gray. Her vision sharpened, colors draining away until everything was in stark black and white. And when the final shift came, she felt herself fall forward onto 4 legs. But when she looked down, expecting to see brown or gray fur, she saw nothing. Her paws were translucent, like smoke. She could see through her own body to the furs beneath. No, Dominic breathed, his voice filled with something Teresa had never heard from him before, fear. Not this. Teresa tried to ask what was wrong, but only a rasping howl came out. The sound was wrong, it didn't echo like a normal wolf's howl. It seemed to be absorbed by the air, leaving a vacuum of silence in its wake. She stumbled to the polished metal on the wall that served as a mirror. The creature staring back wasn't a wolf. It was a nightmare. Her form was skeletal, gaunt, with fur that looked like wisps of black smoke constantly dissipating and reforming. Her eyes were hollow pits that leaked darkness. And when she moved, the stone floor beneath her paws cracked, the stone itself seeming to age and crumble. Voidwalker, Dominic said, his voice hollow. I thought they were a myth. Teresa shifted back to human form, the transformation just as agonizing in reverse. She collapsed naked on the furs, shaking. What am I? She whispered. Dominic sat heavily on the edge of the bed. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked shaken. A curse. Voidwalkers don't heal or create. They drain. They consume. They're the opposite of ghostwalkers, not life-givers but life-takers. I don't understand. Your wolf doesn't strengthen you. She eats everything around you, energy, matter, life itself. You'll never heal properly because your wolf consumes your own healing energy. You'll never be strong because she's feeding on your strength. He looked at her, and those black eyes held something that might have been pity. You're dying from the inside out. You always have been. Teresa's world tilted. How long? Until you burn out? With proper control, maybe 5 years. Without it, he paused. Weeks. Maybe less. So I'm going to die. Everyone dies, Teresa. The question is what you do with the time you have. Teresa laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. I escaped one death sentence to run straight into another. How poetic. Dominic's hand closed over hers. His touch was the only warm thing in the suddenly cold room. There is a way to extend your life. How? Feed the void. His eyes met hers. Your wolf needs energy to sustain itself. If you starve it, it eats you. But if you feed it from external sources, it can be satiated. Temporarily. Teresa pulled her hand back. You mean kill? You want me to kill? I want you to survive. By becoming a monster. Dominic's laugh was bitter. Look around you, Teresa. You're already in a den of monsters. At least this way, you'll be a monster who lives. Teresa stared at him, at this man who was supposed to be her salvation, her destined mate. All she saw was another predator. Get out, she whispered. Teresa, get out. Dominic stood slowly. He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in those black eyes. Then he turned and left, the door locking behind him with a decisive click. Teresa was alone. She looked down at her hands. They looked normal now, but she could feel it beneath the skin, the void, hungry and growing. Dominic was right. She'd been dying her whole life, killed slowly by the very thing that was supposed to make her strong. And now she had a choice: die quietly over the next few weeks, or become exactly what everyone had always feared she was. A monster. Teresa pulled the furs around herself and stared at the wall of weapons. Outside, the morning howls continued. She was starting to understand why. 3 days passed. Teresa stayed in the chambers, refusing to eat, refusing to see Dominic. The Omegas brought food that she couldn't stomach. Her ribs weren't healing. If anything, they felt worse. On the 4th day, she woke to find Dominic sitting in the chair across from the bed, watching her with those unreadable black eyes. You're fading, he said without preamble. I can see it. Your skin is translucent. Teresa looked at her hands. He was right. She could see the veins beneath, dark and wrong. Let me die then, she said. It's what everyone wanted anyway. Is that what Victor told you? That you were worthless? Victor didn't have to tell me. I already knew. Dominic stood and moved to the bed. Before Teresa could protest, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her up. Come with me. There's something you need to see. I'm not going anywhere with you. You are. Because if you stay in this room one more day, you'll die. And I'm not letting my mate die. He dragged her out of the room, through the concrete corridors. Teresa was too weak to fight. They emerged into a large central space, the throne room she'd seen on her first day. But now it was filled with wolves. The entire pack, maybe 70 or 80 of them, were assembled. They knelt in rows, heads bowed. And in the center, bound and gagged, was a man Teresa recognized. Silas. Victor's enforcer. What is this? Teresa breathed. Justice, Dominic said. He raised his voice, addressing the pack. This male broke sacred law. He participated in the trafficking of our kind. He beat and tortured Omegas for his alpha's profit. Dominic's eyes swept the crowd. What is the punishment for such crimes? Death, the pack chanted in unison. Death, Dominic repeated. He looked at Teresa. Delivered by the one he wronged. Teresa's blood went cold. No. Yes. Dominic pulled a long knife from his belt and pressed it into her hand. He's the reason you were dying in those woods. He held you down while Victor broke your ribs. He laughed while you begged for mercy. Teresa stared at the knife, at Silas, who was making muffled sounds of terror behind his gag. I can't, she whispered. You can, Dominic said. And you will. Because if you don't, your void will consume you within days. But if you take his life force, you'll gain weeks. Maybe months. You're asking me to murder him. I'm asking you to survive. Dominic's hand covered hers on the knife. He would have done worse to you and felt nothing. He's not innocent, Teresa. He's a predator who got caught. Teresa looked at Silas. She remembered his hands holding her down, remembered his laughter, remembered the pain. Part of her wanted him dead. The dark, angry part that had been growing since Victor threw her away. How? She asked, her voice hollow. Shift. Your void wolf will know what to do. Teresa closed her eyes. The transformation came easier this time, her body remembering the pathway. Within seconds, she stood on 4 translucent legs, the skeletal void wolf staring at the terrified man. She could feel it now, the hunger. Not in her stomach, but in her very essence. The void wanted to be filled. Silas's eyes widened as she approached. He tried to scramble backward, but Dominic's pack surrounded him, trapping him. Teresa's wolf moved on instinct. She opened her jaws, but instead of biting his throat, something else happened. A dark mist poured from her mouth, engulfing Silas's head. He began to scream behind the gag. Teresa felt it flowing into her, his life force, his energy, his very essence. It was intoxicating. The gnawing emptiness inside her began to fill. The pain in her ribs faded. Her strength returned. But she also felt his memories. His crimes. The faces of the Omegas he'd hurt. The deals he'd made. The blood on his hands. And still, she drank. When she finally released him, Silas's body slumped to the ground. He wasn't dead, that would have been merciful. He was hollow, a living shell. His eyes were vacant, his skin gray and papery. He aged 40 years in seconds. Teresa shifted back to human form, gasping. She felt powerful, alive, and absolutely disgusted with herself. "What did I do?" she whispered. "You fed the void," Dominic said. "And you'll need to do it again. Soon." Teresa looked at the pack. They weren't horrified. They were watching her with something like reverence. "All hail the Void Luna," one wolf called out. The rest took up the chant. "Void Luna. Void Luna. Void Luna." Teresa wanted to run. Wanted to scream that she wasn't this. But the power thrumming through her veins felt too good to deny. Dominic leaned close to her ear. "You see now? You're not broken. You're something else entirely. Something powerful. Something evil," Teresa countered. "Good and evil are luxuries for those who aren't starving," Dominic said. "You did what you needed to survive. That's all that matters." He took her hand and led her back to the chambers. Teresa didn't resist. Because the worst part wasn't what she'd done. It was that she'd enjoyed it. Over the following weeks, Teresa learned what it meant to be a void walker. She needed to feed every 5 to 7 days. Dominic provided volunteers, criminals from other packs, humans who'd harmed supernaturals, anyone he deemed deserving of punishment. Teresa tried to tell herself it was justice, not murder. She was lying. Each feeding made her stronger but colder. The warmth she'd once felt, the capacity for joy or hope, was being consumed by the void along with everything else. She was becoming hollow, like the victims she drained. The pack feared her. They should. When she walked through the compound, wolves pressed themselves against walls, avoiding eye contact. The Omegas who once tried to befriend her now served her in terrified silence. Only Dominic remained unchanged. If anything, he seemed pleased with her transformation. "You're magnificent," he said one night as they lay in the massive bed. He still hadn't completed the mating bond, hadn't bitten her. Teresa suspected it was because he enjoyed keeping her dependent, always hungry, always needing the next feeding he would arrange. "I'm a monster," Teresa said, staring at the ceiling. "You're powerful. There's a difference." "Is there?" Dominic rolled onto his side, those black eyes studying her. You want to know why I'm not afraid of you? Why I brought you here? Because you're insane? He smiled, a rare expression that didn't reach his eyes. Because you and I are the same. I lost my mate 20 years ago. When she died, something broke inside me. The beast took over. I killed half my pack before I regained control. And you know what I realized? Teresa didn't answer. I realized that the beast was always there. My mate didn't create my goodness. She just suppressed my nature. When she was gone, the real me emerged. He touched Teresa's face. You were never broken, Teresa. You were always a void walker. Victor just kept you weak enough that your true nature couldn't surface. Now it has. And it's beautiful. Teresa turned away from him. I don't want to be this. Liar. Dominic's hand gripped her chin, forcing her to look at him. You love the power. You love that people fear you now instead of pitying you. You love that Victor would soil himself if he saw what you've become. Teresa wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Because he was right. She did love it. And that terrified her more than anything. It was the Omega named Claire who changed everything. Claire was the one who'd first bathed Teresa when she arrived. Young, maybe 19, with scared eyes that had seen too much. She'd been trying to escape the compound for weeks, making small mistakes in her duties, testing boundaries. Dominic noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything. She's a liability, he told Teresa one evening. She knows too much about our operations. If she escapes and talks to the authorities, they'll come for us. Teresa stared at him. So transfer her to another pack. No pack will take her. She's damaged goods. Dominic's expression was flat. You need to feed soon anyway. The void is getting restless. I can see it in your eyes. Teresa's stomach dropped. You want me to drain Claire? I want you to eliminate a threat and sustain yourself. 2 birds, 1 stone. She's an innocent girl. She's a security risk. Dominic stood, moving to the weapons wall. You've drained rapists, murderers, traffickers. What makes this different? She hasn't done anything wrong. She's trying to expose us. That's wrong enough. He turned back to her, his black eyes cold. You're Luna of this pack, Teresa. That means you protect the pack, even from internal threats. If you can't make hard choices, you're useless to me. The casual cruelty of his words hit Teresa like a slap. Is that all I am to you? A weapon. You're my mate, Dominic said. But yes, you're also a weapon. The most powerful one I have. And I need you to be willing to use your power when it matters. Killing an innocent girl doesn't matter. Then she's not the one who'll die. Dominic's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. If you won't eliminate the threat, I will. But I'll make it slow. I'll make her suffer. And you'll watch, knowing you could have made it quick and painless. Teresa felt the void inside her writhe, responding to her rage. You're a monster. Yes, Dominic agreed. And so are you. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. He left her alone in the chambers. Teresa sat on the bed, her mind racing. She could refuse. She could fight. But Dominic would kill Claire anyway, and probably punish Teresa in ways she couldn't imagine. Or she could do it. Quick. Painless. Feed the void and save Claire from a worse fate. Either way, Claire died. Either way, Teresa lost another piece of her soul. Teresa found Claire in the communal quarters, folding laundry with mechanical precision. The young Omega looked up as Teresa entered, and fear flashed across her face. Luna, Claire whispered, bowing her head. Walk with me, Teresa said, her voice hollow. They walked through the compound in silence. Teresa led her to the eastern tunnel, the one that led to the old mining shaft. It was isolated. Private. No one would hear. Am I in trouble? Claire finally asked, her voice shaking. Teresa stopped walking. She turned to face the girl. Dominic knows you're planning to run. Claire's face went white. I wasn't. Don't lie. Teresa's voice was flat. He's going to kill you, Claire. Slowly. Painfully. As an example to the others. Tears streamed down Claire's face. Please, Luna. I won't run. I'll stay. I'll be good. I promise. It's too late for that. Teresa felt the void stirring inside her, sensing the fear, the life force radiating from the terrified girl. It wanted to feed. I can make it quick. Painless. You won't feel anything. Claire backed against the tunnel wall. No. Please. I'm only 19. I haven't even lived yet. Neither had I when Victor threw me away, Teresa said. Life isn't fair. You're not like them, Claire sobbed. I've seen you. You hate what you've become. You're still human inside. Please. Don't do this. Teresa closed her eyes. She could walk away. She could refuse Dominic. And then she'd watch him torture this girl for days, maybe weeks, breaking her piece by piece. Or she could end it now. Quick. Merciful. Those were the only choices. Teresa began to shift. No. Claire screamed, trying to run. The void wolf was faster. Teresa pinned her against the wall, her translucent form pressing against the sobbing girl. I'm sorry, Teresa whispered in her wolf's rasping voice. I'm so sorry. She opened her jaws, and the dark mist poured out. Claire's screams echoed through the tunnel. Then they stopped. When Teresa shifted back to human form, Claire's body was on the ground. Not dead, but hollow. Just like all the others. Her eyes were vacant, her skin gray and papery. Teresa stared at what she'd done. An innocent. She'd drained an innocent. She wanted to vomit. Wanted to scream. But the void inside her was satisfied, purring with contentment. She felt strong. Powerful. Alive. And that was the worst part. She'd just destroyed an innocent life, and all she felt was satisfaction. Teresa walked back through the compound. Pack members bowed as she passed. They didn't know what she'd done. Didn't know she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. She found Dominic in the throne room. It's done, she said. Dominic smiled. It was the warmest expression she'd ever seen on his face. Good girl. He stood and walked to her, pulling her into an embrace. I knew you could do it. You're finally understanding what it means to lead. Teresa stood rigid in his arms, feeling nothing. Tonight, Dominic said, his voice low, I'm completing the bond. You've proven yourself. You're ready to be my Luna in every way. Fine, Teresa said. Because what did it matter now? She'd already sold her soul. Might as well sign the final contract. That night, Dominic bit her. The mating bite was supposed to be ecstasy, a moment of perfect connection between souls. Teresa felt nothing. The bond snapped into place, tying her to Dominic permanently. She could feel his emotions now, his desires, his darkness. They matched her own. She was truly one of them now. A monster among monsters. And the girl she'd been, the one who'd shivered in a tent hoping for rescue, was gone forever. 6 months passed. Teresa had become everything Dominic wanted. The perfect Luna. Cold. Efficient. Terrifying. She fed every week now, sometimes more often. The void was insatiable, and Dominic made sure she had plenty of criminals to drain. She stopped asking if they were really guilty. The pack expanded. Word spread of the void Luna and her dark mate, the feral king. Rogues flocked to Shadow Peak, drawn by the promise of power and protection. The compound grew into a small fortress. Other packs began to fear them. Rightfully so. When the Mountain Ridge pack tried to challenge their borders, Teresa and Dominic slaughtered half their warriors in a single night. The survivors fled, spreading stories of the black-eyed alpha and his nightmare mate. Teresa's reputation became legend. The Voidwalker, the Lifestealer, the Hollow Queen. She wore the titles like armor. But inside, where her humanity used to live, there was nothing. Just an endless, aching void that no amount of feeding could fill. Dominic noticed. Of course he did. "You're unhappy," he said one night. "I'm nothing," Teresa corrected. "There's a difference. You have everything. Power, respect, fear. Me? Yes," Teresa said. "I have it all." She looked at him, this man she was bound to for life. She didn't love him. She wasn't sure she'd ever loved him. The mate bond had been a trap, not a gift. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Finding me?" Dominic considered the question. "No. You made me stronger. Together, we're unstoppable." "That wasn't what I asked." "It's the only answer that matters." He pulled her close, his hand possessive on the back of her neck. "We're the same, Teresa. Broken people who stopped pretending to be anything else. That's more honest than most mates ever achieve." Teresa supposed he was right. They were honest about their monstrosity. That night, as Dominic slept beside her, Teresa stared at the ceiling and thought about the tent in the mountains. About the girl she'd been, cold and broken, but still hoping for something better. That girl had been a fool. There was nothing better. There was only survival. Only power. Only the endless hunger of the void. Teresa closed her eyes and dreamed of nothing. Because she'd become nothing. And that was her worst-case scenario realized. Victor Stone finally made his move in the spring. He'd been building alliances, spreading propaganda about the rogue pack in the mountains. He convinced the regional council that Shadow Peak was a threat to all supernatural kind. They came with an army. 200 wolves from 6 different packs, backed by the council's elite guard. They surrounded the compound at dawn. Teresa stood beside Dominic on the ramparts, looking down at the assembled forces. She felt nothing. Not fear, not anger. Just the familiar emptiness. "We're outnumbered," Dominic said calmly. 4-1. "Does it matter?" Teresa asked. Dominic smiled. "No, not with you." The battle was a massacre. Teresa shifted and unleashed the void. She didn't drain individuals anymore. She learned to spread her power like a cloud, touching dozens of wolves at once. She watched them age, weaken, collapse. Their life force flowed into her in rivers. Dominic tore through the rest, his feral rage amplified by the mate bond. Together, they were unstoppable. Victor was among the survivors who tried to flee. Teresa caught him at the tree line. "Wait," he gasped, holding up his hands. "Teresa, please. I'm sorry. I was wrong about you. You're powerful. You're..." Teresa shifted to human form and walked toward him slowly. "You were right about me," she said. "I am broken. I am a monster. You just didn't realize you were creating one." "I can make it right," Victor begged. "I can give you anything." "You already gave me everything," Teresa interrupted. "You gave me pain, suffering, desperation. And from that, I became this." She gestured to herself. "So thank you, Victor. You made me into exactly what I needed to be to survive." She shifted and drained him dry. When it was over, when the battlefield was littered with hollow, aged bodies, the council surrendered. They recognized Shadow Peak as sovereign territory and agreed never to interfere again. Teresa and Dominic had won. They'd won everything. 5 years later, the fortress had grown into a city. Shadow Peak was now the most powerful pack in North America. Other alphas came to pay tribute, to seek favor, to offer their loyalty. Teresa sat on her throne. She'd claimed one to match Dominic's and received them with cold indifference. She was 31 years old and looked ageless, sustained by the constant feeding. But she felt ancient. Dominic ruled beside her, as dark and feral as ever. They were the perfect pair. The nightmare couple that other packs whispered about in the darkness. They had everything. Power, territory, wealth, loyalty. And Teresa felt nothing. The void inside her had consumed everything. Her capacity for joy, for love, for hope. She was a walking shell, powerful but hollow. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, she thought about the girl in the tent. The one who'd been so desperate to survive that she'd accepted rescue from a monster. If she could go back, would she do it differently? Would she choose death in the cold over life in the darkness? Teresa didn't know. Because the worst part wasn't what she'd become. It was that she couldn't remember what she'd been before. The transformation was complete. Irreversible. She was the Void Luna. The Hollow Queen. The most powerful and feared wolf in the supernatural world. And she would live for decades more, sustained by the life force of others, trapped in a mate bond with a monster, ruling over a pack built on fear and violence. This was her victory. This was her survival. This was her worst-case scenario made real. Teresa looked out over her domain from the highest tower of the fortress. Thousands of wolves bowed to her will. Entire packs feared her name. She'd escaped Victor Stone's cruelty and Dominic Ashford's madness. No, that was wrong. She hadn't escaped anything. She'd just become a different kind of monster. And she would be this monster forever. The void inside her rumbled, hungry again. It was always hungry. She'd need to feed soon. Teresa felt nothing about that. She felt nothing about anything. And that was the real horror. Not that she'd become evil, but that she'd become empty. The void had won. The woman who had once been Teresa stood in the throne room of Shadow Peak, now a sprawling fortress city carved into 3 mountains. She was 46 years old, but looked 30, her body sustained by the constant consumption of life force. Dominic was dead. He'd finally gone fully feral 5 years ago, and Teresa had been forced to drain him completely to save the pack. She'd felt nothing when his hollow body collapsed at her feet. She ruled alone now. The Void Queen. Unchallenged. Unchallengeable. A young Omega was brought before her, accused of stealing food. The girl was maybe 18, thin and terrified, with desperate eyes that reminded Teresa of someone. Herself. 30 years ago. Please, the girl begged. I was just hungry. I haven't eaten in 3 days. I'm sorry. Teresa looked at her from the throne. She should feel compassion. Should remember what it was like to be powerless and starving. But she felt nothing. Feed her, Teresa said to her guards. Double rations for a week. Then assign her to better duties. The girl gasped in surprise. Thank you, Luna. Thank you. As the girl was led away, Teresa's second-in-command approached. You're getting soft, he said. No, Teresa replied, her voice hollow. I'm just bored. Because that was the truth. She'd won. She'd survived. She'd conquered. And now she had nothing but an eternity of emptiness ahead of her. The void inside her stirred, never satisfied, never full. Teresa closed her eyes. Somewhere, in a dimension she could no longer access, the ghost of a broken Omega shivered in a tent and prayed for rescue. Teresa wished she could warn her. Wished she could tell her that sometimes survival is worse than death. That sometimes The monster who saves you is just the monster who gets to consume you slowly. But that girl was gone. Had been gone for decades. And the Void Queen who remained would rule in darkness forever. Alone. Powerful. And completely, irreversibly hollow.